The man in today's story experienced what I could only describe as hell when he was lost and all alone in the middle of nowhere on a desert. He had no food, no water, no clothes, no nothing. It was a real nightmare. And this is his story. Ricky Megee was born in 1971 and grew up in Melbourne, Australia. He had a good childhood with a few ups and downs. Once he became an adult, he lived an ordinary life doing various jobs throughout the years, like being a carpet salesman or a nightclub bouncer. But things drastically changed when he finally became a bailiff. He got into troubles and went to jail for drug offenses and being involved in a fight. Fast forward to 2006, he was 35 years old and out of jail. From Melbourne, he moved to Sydney and then to Queensland in hopes of starting over. There he wanted a better life and a better and more permanent job. Luckily, after some searching, he got the news that he had just landed a new job. It is to work in a government department in Port Hedland. So, in January of 2006, Ricky, in hopes of starting this new job, began his 3,000-mile journey all the way from his home in Brisbane, Queensland to Port Hedland, Western Australia. So, in his 2001 Mitsubishi Challenger, he took the rough and dusty Bunteen Highway. It has long stretches of desert track through barren, bare and remote lands of the outback of the Northern Territory. This is one of the most isolated parts of Australia, and the usual weather there is boiling hot and dry. Pretty uninhabitable for most humans, but people know that and would still take this route. So, Ricky, being one of those people, has been driving on this highway for quite a while. There were barely any vehicles on the road. Could be scary or peaceful depending on the person. So, in peace or terror, when Ricky was navigating his way through these bare lands, from a distance, he saw a group of stranded travelers huddled around their vehicle on the side of the road, hitchhiking. The activity hitchhiking itself is already pretty alarming on a road like this, but it looked like their car has broken down or something. So out of concern, Ricky slowed down and decided to pull over. So he did. 3 men came over to the car window as Ricky was pulling over. They needed help to get their car going. The trio seemed very friendly and normal. They said their car suddenly stopped running out of gas, so they are in a bit of a pickle. Well, it's understandable. You see, to get help or gas, they would have to walk for miles, and that is if they got enough water and that the weather is not as hot. It would be quite the challenge for most of us. So Ricky understood this struggle and said, "Okay fellas, get in. I could give you a lift to the next town where you could find some help or get gas." Out of the 3 men, only one got in and Ricky started driving. For some time, the two were having some small talk, which then turned into a friendly conversation. However, things did not stay that way for too long. As Ricky was driving while sipping on his drink, he felt a bit dazed, almost like he was losing consciousness and about to pass out. Well, he was drugged. It isn't clear as to how or who did this, but it is believed that the hitchhiker has either put something in Ricky's drink or stabbed him with a syringe. Normally, Ricky would open his own drinks from the car's refrigerator, but on this occasion, he let the stranger open one for him. So, Ricky got confused and disoriented out of his mind. 1 second he was driving and then the next, everything went blank, just blackness. And suddenly he woke up a few hours later in some sort of a camp a bunch of men have set up. Well, it was those 3 men, or hitchhikers, or strangers, whatever you like to call them. So, which means, this time the other 2 also have joined the one that got in Ricky's car. But the second Ricky opened his eyes is when things got real. A gun was pointed at him, preventing him from moving even an inch. The surroundings were unclear, he doesn't know where he is or what is happening to him. But that's when one of the captors gave him some water to drink. And then after some time they left with most of Ricky's belongings. It was as simple as that. No explanation, no apparent motive, they just left and even got the shoes Ricky was wearing. However, for some unknown reason, they left the $12.50 Ricky had in his pocket. Their actions were undoubtedly mind-boggling. Out of pure shock and the remaining drugs in Ricky's system, he blanked out again. But this time when he woke up, he opened his eyes to something different. Oh, you could say something much, much worse. When he woke up, he was in a desert, buried naked in a shallow hole with a black plastic covering him entirely. Some dirt and rocks were thrown on top of him to make sure that he can't come out of the hole. Sounds pretty terrifying, right? Well, if you think that is bad, wait till you hear who's waiting for Ricky to wake up. Well, it was a bunch of hungry dingoes scratching at the plastic sheet trying to get at him. If it weren't for that sheet, they probably would have eaten Ricky right then and there. So many odds were against his survival now, but believe me, this is only just the beginning. Certainly, a human normally cannot last much long in a desert like this. This desert, which is called Tanami Desert, is specifically pretty rough due to the hot weather in the Outback. However, despite the brutally high temperature, all Ricky felt was just confusion. That's all. He spent a good amount of time trying to process what just happened. But somehow eventually he removed the plastic sheet off of him and pushed himself off of the ground and out of the hole. He took some rocks and threw at the dingoes. Luckily, it scared them off. Then he sat down in a shade that was miraculously nearby him. There he spent hours trying to put himself together. It was difficult for him to think clearly. The effects of the drugs were not yet worn off. Nobody was in sight. No roads, no houses, no water, no nothing. Every direction he looked towards, there was nothing but just desert. Ricky knew if he were to stay there waiting any longer, he would go crazy. I mean, knowing that you're lost in a desert and have no water or food to survive is enough already for someone to freeze in terror. But Ricky got up and started walking across the desert aimlessly, naked and barefoot in hopes of finding some help. He was dangerously dehydrated, so for water he drank his own pee. Yeah, you heard me right. He is at that point where you would do unthinkable things to survive. So Ricky continued walking. He walked and walked and walked. Found nothing. It's been a while by this point, and he already knew that there's no way he can survive the blistering heat of the Outback, let alone the starvation and dehydration. The pressure and fear he is feeling must be excruciating. During the day, the temperature can go above 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas at night it's the opposite. The temperature rapidly goes down and become almost bone-chilling cold. He thought the next couple of days will be hell. There was no sign of any bodies of water. The sun went down and the night got colder. He couldn't find shelter. In fact, he was nowhere near one. So, through these harsh conditions, he still kept walking. And after a long night, a new day arrived. He was hungry out of his mind, but as you already know, there was nothing to eat. So he kept going. A day turned into 2 days, 2 days turned into 3, 3 turned into 4, and so on and on. Now you might be thinking, has he only been drinking his own pee? Not quite. At some point, Ricky realized in order for him to not die, he must find a good source of water and rest next to it. You can't drink your own pee and survive. Luckily, it was the rainy season, so here and there were a few pockets of water, and Ricky miraculously found one and decided to make shelter right next to it. Around this time, rain clouds covered the sky. Ricky thought he was hallucinating when he felt the raindrops on his skin. Well, in Ricky's circumstances, it could not get any better. To him, raining meant more water to drink. So after some good rest, he decided to leave the shelter he made next to the water pocket and continue his search for help. On the way, he discovered more sources of water. It was just luck. Throughout the days, he randomly came across various dams and waterholes where he got to drink water from. But whenever good water like that was unavailable, he went back to drinking his own pee. Now, you might be wondering, what about food then? What has he been eating? Well, at a certain point, probably around on day 7, Ricky got unbearably hungry. His stomach cramped and his muscles ached from exhaustion. He knew it was about time he find something, anything to eat. Then a lizard scampered past. With no second guessing, Ricky struck and stunned the animal. In seconds, the reptile was killed. Ricky obviously didn't have fire, so he improvised and laid the lizard in the sun for a couple hours. The animal got well dried out. Then he peeled off its skin and took a bite out of it. It was his first meal in days. Since then, he's been eating things. By things, I mean leeches, insects, snakes, frogs, ants, more lizards, edible plants, and pretty much anything that wasn't poisonous. In fact, Ricky got so accustomed to eating these animals that at one point, he even developed an affinity for specific kinds of frogs over others. He didn't like eating leeches as much because he had to eat them as fast as he could, otherwise they attached to the inside of his mouth. Yeah, that sounds insane, but he was on survival mode. He would do anything to stay alive. That's a primal human instinct. Plus, he found eating one meal a day to be the most optimal. So during the day, while walking, he would hunt animals and then eat them every evening. That was enough for him to keep going. As crazy as it sounds, the good thing is that now he has some nutrients and good water in his system. All in all, the wet season and all the wild animals Ricky managed to hunt helped him increase his chances of survival. So, after many agonizing days, Ricky made his way through the northeastern fringe of the desert. All that by foot. From time to time he's been passing out, suffering heat exhaustion. But each day he told himself, today's the day I'm going to find help and save myself. But every night, his efforts felt wasted as he didn't see a single person. True desperation and agony, that's all he could feel, but his will to live never wavered. So, as usual, he continued getting baked in the sun and frozen at night. On the way, he stopped multiple times and made temporary shelters out of old branches to stay out from the sun and rest at night. But eventually, he was lucky enough to find a decrepit windmill. There he made a little humpy out of a feed trough that was at some cattle yards. He dragged it up on top of the dam, and next to the windmill, he flipped it over and dug a hole. There he found more safety and security with plenty of good water. So now that he found the basic needs to live out in the desert, he decided for a while to put a stop to his constant search for help and just rest. I mean a good, long rest. He's been in pain for weeks. His body reached its limit days ago. So this quick breather turned into a 10-week-long stay. He basically lived there, eating lizards and snakes as usual. Despite his tremendous efforts, he still lost half of his body weight by the 10th week. So after a while, he got dangerously weak to a point where he could not even go on his usual scavenging and hunting trips. Ricky was mentally drained as well. The truth was that he was slowly starving to death, although he ate a few wild animals. At one point, he even made a cross. He knew he's spending his last few days on Earth. Sooner or later, he was certain that he's going to die. He thought the cross would be his grave. He prayed someday, just someday, his family will find his corpse. He wanted his family to find some peace knowing what happened to him. So with that, Ricky was having his lowest moment. Meanwhile, dingoes were prowling around his camp. It seemed they were looking for a meal of their own. So, Ricky was worried about that as well. Thus, every night, he had to block the entrance to the shelter to keep those wild dogs out one more night. Yeah, a lot was going on. To make matters worse, he even got an agonizing abscess of the tooth. It weakened his body even more. This condition got fatal. But Ricky was quite a guy. He wrenched the tooth out of his mouth with his car keys. It's incredible the things you would do to survive. Normally you would never ever even think of doing such things. But Ricky did. And he did it all for 71 days straight until he was eventually found about 500 kilometers or 310 miles southwest of Catherine, Northern Territory. The rescuers were some local workers of a cattle station known as Jackaroos. When they found Ricky, he was on the brink of death, starved, sunburnt, and suffering from malnutrition and exposure. He told the workers the last thing he remembers is his car breaking down on 23rd of January while he was driving. Yeah, he did not tell the proper and full story to anyone right away. The station manager, Mark Clifford, described Ricky as just a walking skeleton when he was brought to the station. The area Ricky was found in was one of the most isolated places in Northern Territory. It was a miracle that Jackaroo guys found him. Otherwise, he would never ever have been saved. at least in time. On 5th of April 2006, Ricky was flown to Royal Darwin Hospital for immediate treatments. He was described as emaciated by medical staff. The frogs, snakes and lizards he ate was of course enough to keep him alive, but they didn't give him enough nutrition, so he had gone from 105 kilograms to 48 kilograms at the end of the 71-day period. Though he was well hydrated, that surely is thanks to the rainy season. Northern Territory Police then came to do a little bit of questioning to figure what really went down that day when Ricky went missing. Some doubted the validity of Ricky's version of the events as he had previous minor drug convictions. So this fair suspicion led some people to think that Ricky's criminal activity is what might have gotten him in trouble in the first place. But later police dismissed all the allegations about any wrongdoings on Ricky's part, as no one was able to find any evidence on Ricky's committing a crime or anything of that sort regarding this whole ordeal. Even Ricky's stolen car, the Challenger, was never seen or found again. Police considered the case as a mystery, as even Ricky himself couldn't remember much of anything about that day he went missing. Nonetheless, with proper care, Ricky had a fast recovery and was discharged from the hospital after 6 days. The cattle station manager, Clifford, said that he was stunned to see how fast Ricky recovered. "I saw him last week when he had just been admitted," he said. "He looked like a skeleton then, but I saw him on TV last night and he looked completely different." So despite the doubts people had, Ricky strongly stood by his story. In fact, to prove the validity of his experience, he even offered to eat frogs on live TV. Later, Ricky revealed, beside his strong conviction to stay alive, he had another force that helped him throughout the whole time. It was the thought of seeing his family and friends. After this unreal and near-death nightmare, Ricky started a new life, and now he manages a construction team in Dubai. He wishes to one day use his building expertise to do aid work in Africa. He later said, "Before I was a bit blasé about life, but now I cherish it every single day. I just think that there's a reason why I didn't die, and that is to help other people." So that is the story of Ricky Megee. He spent more than 2 months in one of the world's most inhospitable environments. Nonetheless, what really happened to him remains a mystery to this day. But I guess what's really important is that Ricky survived the dreadful ordeal that most people would never ever have made through. Ricky was strong, so he survived. What do you guys think? Would you have survived living in a desert for 71 days? Well, if you ask me, I don't think anyone can give a right answer, because what we think we would do in a close to death situation can be much more different than what we would actually do. So who knows? But yeah, with that, we've got to the end of the story. Let me know about your thoughts about this story down in the comment section. Alright then, that's all for now. I'll see you in my next video of Night Dangers. And until then, stay safe out there and goodbye.